Sorry. Good to see you all. We've got this, so it's the start of a new month, this month, and the project, there's a couple of different little projects lined up for June. So the first one is looking at landscape using watercolour in a slightly more gouache style, so using white with watercolour. So I'll go into that in a minute. That's that. And then I think moving on as we go through the month, that's the wrong one. Moving on as we go through the month, I think we can do a little bit on buildings and perspective, and maybe get on to rhino printing for anybody that wants to do rhino printing towards the end. So that's the plan, if we get that covered. So I brought in, so these are a few of my sketches. There's a few here. So this is kind of more how I tend to use my watercolours. That I did last week.
That's called Castle.
It's called Castle, yeah. So very quick sketch in using watercolour, but using white with it. So painting on like a toned paper, sort of grey paper, or in this case it's like a brown paper. And that's just how I feel, a bit more comfortable painting that way. So proper pure watercolours, you would use watercolour paper like this, nice sort of reasonably thick paper, maybe a tiny bit of texture. I tend to use watercolour more as a sketching medium, so this is more how I tend to use the watercolours. And I also use white paint, so that's basically what gouache paint is watercolour but with more opaque watercolour. So I thought it might be something worth having a little look at. I haven't got any, I suppose I could take it paint out that, but I'll have a go on white paper, because I actually find it a little bit more difficult on white paper than I do on the toned paper. So what I'm using is just my ordinary watercolours, but I'm using a little bit of white gouache with it to make it more opaque. And I thought to start with sort of reasonably simple landscape. This is in Rochford, and I generally start with the background. So I'm going to use a little bit of white with this, make it more opaque. And to me it's not particularly blue sky, so maybe make it slightly pinky. Or lilac-y, that's a hint of, so that could be, just pop something into the sky. I always find that mixing white in with paint, it's never going to be quite as bright as the watercolour paper. And that's partly why I like using my sketchbooks that are a bit darker. It's a little bit more natural for me. So that'll be that bit. And then gradually work my way forward. So these fields are a slightly yellowy green perhaps. So I mix a green and then a little bit of white to that as well. What you find is, as you're going further back in space, the colours become a bit more muted. So there might be a little bit stronger here, a little bit here. So there's a gate there. But I don't particularly like the way the grass lines up with the top of the gate. So I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Sometimes things are a little bit awkward. So I do make a few changes as I go. A little bit more white, just lighten that up a little bit as I go further back into space. This is still fairly wet, so I can blend the colours a little bit. And then right back here, it's a little bit more yellowy. I think there's perhaps wheat field or something like that. So using a little bit of, I think this is raw sienna and white. Put that in there. So it can end up looking a little bit chalky. That's the nature of it. And then these trees in the distance, I'll go for a slightly smaller brush. And they're really like a slightly grey, bluey grey. Because they're so far back, they're not particularly strong green. And what you can do is, if you want to make something feel further back, make it a little bit lighter and a little bit greyer. If you use like a really intense green, it tends to pull forward to the foreground. So I'm just going to grey that down. So the trees in the background can be slightly paler. A bit like that. I've opened up a bit of space there because there's too many leaves in the way. So again, making a few changes. But at the end of the day, you know, people can be looking at this painting, they're not going to look for where it was or some sort of reference. That way. There's a little bit of the road and the pavement, so that can go this sort of colour. Work that right into that. And then I think, what next? Perhaps put the gate in next, and then the trees and the roses. So I've got some messy palette colour that was there already. I thought I might as well keep that there and use it. That will suffice for the gate, I think. So now onto the top of the gate there. And the bottom can be there. What I did do to start with this, I did a little bit of pencil drawing, but it really depends how complicated the scene is. With some of these drawings, like paintings, this one I did draw out quite carefully because there's quite a lot of perspective in. But other ones, something like a very quick sketches of boats, it's just as easy to just draw it with the paint itself. So that's something you could experiment with. So I'll just pop you again. So that's in. Now, whereas watercolour is quite unforgiving, if you're using it more like gouache, you can use a bit of white and just like where that bit went over, I can just overpaint that. And that won't really show. So it's a little bit more forgiving than pure watercolour paint. And then what I need next is some trees. And again, this is how I'll paint with oil paint. So I go with the darks first. So I'm going to mix a green, darkish green. That can be like this. And then these can come over this side. I think where there's a lot of light, I might lighten them up a little bit just over here. Let's go for a slightly brighter green as well. So I'm mixing a slightly lighter green in there. And then just make that a little bit brighter and lighter in the middle. Maybe a little bit pink in the mix to make that less intense. There's some lights in there. A little bit of lighter greens in here. And where the roses are, I haven't actually put the roses in yet. Let's make some a bit darker in here. Just a nice bright pink. So I've got a little bit of magenta. Yeah. So I'll go in a little bit darker to start with. Oops. It's not getting messy, start that mix again. Yeah, and then a bit more white, so that sort of stands out. So it's kind of more like an oil painting or acrylic approach, but using watercolours. And the advantage of this is it will dry quite quickly, probably a little bit quicker than oil paints would. Not as quick as acrylics, but you know, quick enough. The disadvantage, well, the other thing that you can do with this, which you couldn't do with acrylics, is you can almost like sort of wash bits back and lift bits out. So if I want to lift areas out like that, I can then wash it away. Whereas acrylics, it's going to dry pretty solid pretty quickly. So yeah, just thought I'd show you that. This, I mean, it's a medium. I haven't really used it for a long time, but it's really the medium that I used a lot when I was probably about 13, 14. I started off with oils and then did that for a year or two, but then I got the gouache and I really sort of took to those and found them quite a nice, easy, almost like intuitive medium to start with. So that's very much the medium I started with. Probably wants a little bit of grass here. And again, you could vary the strength of the paint. This is also something I see quite a lot of my watercolour friends doing. It's putting a bit of tape around. I've not really done that before, but it gives you a nice edge to it. Finish. So be careful it doesn't tear the paper. But it kind of frames it, isn't it? It makes it a little bit better. So yeah, I just thought I'd introduce that as an idea, something you might want to try, either as a painting or in sketchbooks if you're out sketching. And so I've got one or two sort of students coming away. We've not done everybody from this group, but got a couple of holidays planned and a couple of students coming on those. So I thought it'd be quite nice to introduce some of these sort of outdoor mediums. Any questions? Okay, right, okay.